My name is Jonathan, and I'm 21 years old, and this all took place when I was 16. What happened to my friend and I still haunts me and freaks me out to talk about, even to this very day. I was sleeping over at a friend's house one night, and it was in the middle of the week, and school was called off early in advance for the next day. I live in Colorado, and we get hit with some pretty crazy snowstorms in the winter, and this was one of those nights. The roads were so bad that the school called for a snow day, so I was really excited. I was staying at my friend Tyler's house, and we were as happy as any other 16-year-old would be about having no school. Luckily, he lived in the same neighborhood as me, so all I had to do was pack my bag up with the things that I was going to need for the night and just walk over there. It's no more than a 5-minute walk, so really, it was no big deal. Of course, our parents had to work the next morning, so we were going to have the house to ourselves all day the next day. We stayed up late and played video games and goofed around all night, talking about the most random stuff you could imagine that teenage boys would talk about. Nothing weird happened that night. It was a normal night. However, the next day was when things went crooked. I would say it was around 11 o'clock in the morning. Tyler was making a sandwich in the kitchen, and I was using the bathroom when suddenly the doorbell rang. We both heard it clear as day. Even though it spooked us initially, we weren't that worried about it. We live in a relatively safe area, and bad things like home invasions and stuff like that are almost completely unheard of here. Tyler even made a joke about how it was probably a Jehovah's Witness or something. I ran out of the bathroom, and both Tyler and I walked over to the front door. "Yo, help me. If anyone's in there, please help me. I'm in serious trouble right now." Our neighborhood is really quiet, and it really isn't very likely for someone to knock on our door, period, as it just wasn't something that happened often. Tyler looked outside to try and see who it was, and it most definitely wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. It was some guy that was dressed in shorts and a t-shirt. He had short black hair and was probably around 5'10". "What the hell is going on? Who are you?" I asked. Tyler then hit me in the shoulder as he was clearly upset with me for letting ourselves be known. Thinking back, I really wish I wouldn't have said anything, because just maybe the man would have walked away and none of this would have happened at all. Definitely wasn't the smartest move on my part, I can admit that. The man outside then started banging on the door and begging us to let him in. We knew that something was terribly wrong, so obviously we didn't let him in. We ran downstairs and we hid in a secret spot in the basement that Tyler showed me. He called his mom to let her know, and she said that she was on her way home. Luckily, Macy, Tyler's mom, only worked about 5 minutes away from the house, so she would be there soon. It seemed like right after Tyler hung up the phone, though, we heard footsteps coming from upstairs. We knew there was no way it was his mom. "Dude, what the hell are we going to do?" Tyler said. I told him that we needed to stay calm and just wait it out. "Dude, are you kidding me? Screw that," Tyler said. "Well, what do you suggest we do then?" I asked. "Literally anything but sit down here. We need to run," he said. I didn't know how good of an idea that was, but I wasn't going to sit there and hide alone, so I followed. We opened the door ever so slowly, and we made our way across the basement to this window that we were going to attempt to fit through. I didn't see how that was going to work, but I knew it was the best option in all reality. I cupped my hands together so I could give him a boost, and Tyler managed to open the window. He struggled for a minute, but eventually he was able to make it outside. What about me? I thought silently. That was right when Tyler told me to grab the wooden coffee table across from me and use it as a stepping stool to boost me up, and then he was going to pull me out. So that's exactly what I did. I jumped up, and Tyler grabbed my arm and pulled with all of his might, and somehow I was able to make it through the window, and I made it outside as well. I had to catch my breath from panicking so hard that we didn't even realize the man was standing directly behind us. He looked at us with the most disturbing look you can possibly imagine. He was a freaking creep. We both ran towards the front of the house, and ironically, Tyler's mom was pulling in the driveway right as we made it to the end of the driveway. The man followed us, but very quickly ran the opposite way when he saw that we were with an adult. Tyler's mom called the police, and we were able to find out that the guy was a wanted fugitive that had just escaped prison less than 24 hours prior. The police showed us a picture of the guy, and Tyler and I both confirmed to the officers that it was the same person. They caught him later that night, and now he's in prison and probably will be for a long time. He was a convicted sex offender and liked to assault young boys, and more specifically boys our age. He had definitely been spying on us and knew we were alone. It makes me sick to my stomach how messed up some people are. this particular evening, when I was 14, I was at my friend Jared's house. He was my best friend, and I went over there quite often. My parents knew I was over there, but Jared's parents didn't. I didn't know this until later. Anyways, his parents were gone for the night, so we were able to do whatever we wanted to. So of course, us being kids, we stayed up all night playing Call of Duty in the living room. Jared had his own TV and gaming setup in his bedroom, but his dad had recently just bought a new TV, which was easily twice the size of Jared's, so we were excited to move the Xbox out there and just play in the living room instead. Jared asked me if I wanted to stay the night. I kind of already thought that that's what I was doing already anyways, and so I was confused. I asked him if I was even supposed to be there, and he just kind of shrugged his shoulders, which told me no. I sighed and I just decided to go with it. A few hours passed by and we started to get tired, so Jared grabbed some blankets and 2 pillows for the both of us. We decided we were going to go to sleep upstairs in his room, so we goofed off for a little while before ultimately falling asleep. I'm a light sleeper, so it wasn't a surprise when I woke up to the sound of some music being played outside. I looked outside and I saw that there was a car parked in the driveway. I figured it was Jared's mom and dad, but when I woke Jared up, he told me that it definitely wasn't and that there was no chance that it was either of their cars. The car was still running, but it didn't look like anyone was inside of it. We ran to the living room and we found that the front door was wide open. It was at this point that the hairs on the back of my neck were standing up and I knew we were really in for some shit. Jared's room was all the way to the left side of the house and was the last door on the left in the hall. We turned around to go back to his room and grab our phones so we could call for help, but as we were passing by the bathroom, someone snatched Jared and began running away. I swear I've never felt like that in my life, like the amount of fear. I turned back around instead of grabbing my phone and I began chasing the man down. We were running through the living room and Jared was fighting, trying to get away from him, and the man was starting to gain some distance on me. Then, as I was running outside down the steps, I saw a creepy green and tan collared van parked on the side of the road in front of the house. And that's when I knew I had to do something extremely quick before something life-changing happened. I grabbed a shovel that was thankfully sitting in the front yard by the landscape bed that apparently Jared's dad left outside by accident. And I managed to get within an arm's length away from them, and I struck the guy right in the side of the leg with it as hard as I possibly could. They both fell straight to the ground, and I helped Jared up, and we ran back inside, and the man took off in his van. A neighbor saw some of the commotion and was already on the phone with the police, and they arrived not too long after. As for the other car that was in the driveway, we're still not sure what that was all about. Something tells me it was an accomplice, and maybe he got cold feet or something and ditched early. Or maybe he had nothing to do with it at all and it was purely coincidental, but I doubt it. The police were never able to find either of the 2 suspects, and ever since that day, going over to Jared's has been weird to say the least. I've always been good friends with one of my cousins, Cole, who was the same age as I am. The 2 of us were not quite inseparable, but we always did get along very well together, and we were often found together, both in school and outside of school. When we were 12 and in the 6th grade, I was hanging out with Cole on a Friday afternoon around the later part of May, and we were psyched at the start of the weekend. We wound up at his house since he didn't live too far from me, and at one point my mom called to say that our grandpa was in the hospital. While the issue with our grandpa wasn't expected to be life-threatening, he was being kept at the hospital overnight for observation. And both my parents and Cole's were planning on staying with him and my grandma at the hospital. I was told that I was given the okay to stay at Cole's house for the night, with Cole's 15-year-old brother, Hunter, being in charge while our parents were out. This was fine by us. I got along well enough with Hunter, and he was never the bossy older brother/cousin that some of my other friends said they had to put up with. We ordered a pizza and enjoyed goofing off as boys that age tend to do. At around 9 or so, there was a knock at the front door and Cole went to answer it. I was a bit curious as to who it could be at that time of the night, and so I watched from a ways back. At the door, there were 2 older guys. They said that they were there with the city and that they were investigating reports about the water pressure supposedly being bad in the neighborhood. They asked Cole if his parents were home, and when Cole said they were unavailable at the moment, which is what we were told to say to strangers if our parents weren't home. The guys then started asking a bunch of questions about how the water pressure was in the house and if they could come inside to check. Hunter came over at that point and politely told the guys that the water pressure was fine and perhaps they should move on to check the other homes in the neighborhood. The guys seemed reluctant to leave, but eventually they turned and walked away after Hunter started closing the door. After the door was shut, we looked at each other and shrugged, but neither of us really thought too much after that, and we went back to doing what we were doing. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. Cole and Hunter shared a bedroom, and we all agreed that I'd sleep in there with them, rather than me hitting the sack on the couch or something like that, so that way we could all talk while we fell asleep. Hunter grabbed a sleeping bag out of their camping supplies for me, and when we got back into the bedroom, we all stripped down to our underwear/pajamas. And then they climbed into their beds, and I quickly crawled into the sleeping bag, and after talking for a while about random stuff, we all eventually fell asleep. Early the next morning, I got up because I had to pee, and so I quietly got out of the sleeping bag and went and did my business in the bathroom. On the way back to the bedroom, I heard something in the family room, which was on the opposite end of the house from the bedroom and particular bathroom I was using. I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time, thinking it must either be Cole or Hunter, until I got back in the bedroom and realized that both of them were still in there. Trying not to panic, I woke them and I told them that I thought someone was in the house. They quietly followed me, and the moment we walked into the family room, we saw the two guys from the night before in there. And it was rather clear that they were robbing the place. One of them started moving towards us as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. The three of us promptly raced to the front door somehow and managed to get it unlocked and open in time, and we fled outside. As luck would have it, a cop was driving by at that particular moment, so we quickly flagged him down and we told him about the two guys in the house. The cop called for backup, and within a couple of minutes, several other cops were there and they proceeded to enter the house. After some searching, they caught the two guys. The cops figured out that the two guys must have entered from the window in the laundry room that had a broken latch, and that they had probably targeted this house specifically because they knew us kids were alone. And they probably figured that if we discovered them, we would be easier to deal with than adults. To add insult to injury, when we were waiting outside while the cops searched the house, some of the neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about. And this included some kids who went to the same school as Cole and me, including a few who were in our 6th grade class with us. It was during that time that the three of us realized that we had never got the chance to get dressed, so just like in the stereotypical nightmare, we had to stand outside in a full view of everyone in just our briefs for what seemed like forever before being allowed back inside. When we went back to school on Monday, Cole and I had to put up with more than a bit of snickering and being the butt of every joke for the next few weeks until school ended for the summer. I was about 13 or 14 and I was babysitting 2 boys for some church members. I had done this before and the kids loved me and the parents were very comfortable with me. This was a night where they were supposed to be gone the entire night, as late as 2:30 in the morning. I was doing it for free that day because they were going to do something church related, and that's just how I rolled back then. Anyway, the house they lived in was an apartment complex. You know, one of those small ones that had 2 floors and 4 doors on each level. They were on the bottom floor with 2 bedrooms on either side of the apartment, with the kitchen on the left and the living room on the right, and the sliding glass door to a small patio and a public bathroom next to the front door. It was about 1:30 a.m. and I knew they would be getting home soon. The kids were knocked out after me practically begging them to call it a night in endless bedtime stories, and I had just finished my homework. They didn't have cable. This was before Netflix became an online service, so they had a couple of DVDs and VHSs to watch. So I grabbed one of the Land Before Time movies to make the night go quicker. I was already very tired and I had nodded off a couple times. About 30 minutes went by and I could hear knocking on the front door. Knowing the parents had a key, I did nothing but sit there in the dark with the TV glowing. Being a paranoid person and who watches and reads enough horror, I grabbed the baseball bat that was next to the couch. What happened next will haunt me forever. I heard a small voice, a young woman's. "Oh dear, that won't help you." My heart stopped and I realized that the patio door didn't have the blinds shut. My eyes shift slowly to the sliding door and I see someone on the patio staring in. I couldn't make anything out. other than that they were very short and wide. I screamed and ran into the kids' room. Thankfully, they were still asleep. Sadly, this was before I had a cell phone and there were no cordless landlines I could access. All I did was push the dresser in front of the door and I stared out of the only window in the room. That's when it became dark as a shadow loomed across the window. The knocking started again and the woman's voice called out, "Come on, dearie, I won't hurt you. Please come out." The window was being knocked so hard that I was afraid it was going to break. The kids finally woke up and they were screaming and scared. I was a big girl and I could at the time lift my own weight, but knowing I had 2 kids with me, I became vulnerable and afraid. Not too long after this, I hear the father yell out, "Hey, who the hell are you?" And the person ran off. The front door opened shortly after and there was harsh knocking on the kids' bedroom door. Thankfully, it was the parents, and after I let them in and put the dresser back, I explained what happened and they called the police. When they arrived, they obviously found nothing, but the bushes that hide the patio were obviously cut up and ripped up to get through. I babysat for them once more after this, but they moved away about 5 months later, and I never babysat anyone ever again. And again to this day, I know the woman was long gone, but every time I hear a knock, a chill runs through me. When I was 14, I was asked to babysit my 3 younger cousins, aged 8, 4, and 1, in an extremely rural, mountainous part of Pennsylvania. My aunt and uncle had a wedding to go to over an hour away. It wouldn't be back until very late. Their house was situated on a steep mountainside. Their back deck had a 15-foot drop onto a rocky hill, below leading down to a river. Their closest neighbors were about a half-mile away, and the closest main road was a mile away. And at night, there were no lights to be seen anywhere around them. Basically, it was in the middle of nowhere, and you would have to know where you are going to get there. You don't just accidentally end up here. My aunt and uncle left us with some pizza and their cell phone number next to their landline and headed out. This was the early 2000s, and I didn't have a cell phone, but even if I did, I wouldn't get reception there anyway. The baby was already asleep. The 4-year-old wasn't feeling well and was quietly watching TV in the living room as he dozed off, and the 8-year-old was playing Guitar Hero with me up on the loft. The loft overlooked the living room to the left, where I could keep an eye on the 4-year-old, and there was a huge window that overlooked the driveway to the right. This description of the driveway is an important detail to the story. The road that led to their house ran straight into their forked driveway. It was a dead-end road. The house was as far as you could go. Go to the left part of the driveway, there is a large open carport, and that's where my aunt and uncle and anyone who ever visited parked. The right part of the driveway led down a very short but very steep hill to a large leveled out area and ended against the garage door that opened to the basement of the house. It was never used as a garage, but served as my uncle's man cave and where he spent most of his time. Right beside the garage door, there was a normal door with a window so you could see right in. But this driveway was exclusively used by the kids as a play area because it was the only flat yard-like area on the property. And being on a mountainside, there isn't much room to safely play otherwise. No cars ever drove down there, ever. There are too many toys and bikes in the way, and friends and family knew this. It was about 10 p.m., pitch black outside, no moon to illuminate the area either. My cousin and I were still playing Guitar Hero when headlights caught the corner of my eye. And it wasn't my aunt's minivan headlights. They were huge truck headlights with those roof lights you often see on Jeeps or those big trucks. Not only that, the truck was going down the right driveway. The kids' play area. And this was not my aunt and uncle. This was not anyone they knew. Panic and dread filled my body. I was a small teenage girl, alone in an isolated house on a mountain at night with 3 children in my care. In a terrified voice, I asked my cousin, "Who is that? Jake, do you know whose truck that is?" And then he looked panicked. "No, I've never seen that truck before," he replied. I quickly ushered him downstairs, still unsure what to do, but the 2 little ones were still sleeping down there and I wanted to make sure they were safe. I checked on the baby and then grabbed the phone to call 911. Then I started to hear the metal garage door being shaken violently. No one ever opened that garage door. More panic fills me. I hear them try the door beside it. The metal doorknob is now jiggling. No one was actually knocking. It's not like they were checking to see if my uncle was down there. Plus the lights were out. It was dark down there and they knew no one was down here. They were definitely breaking in. The door leading to the basement stairs were right next to the phone, so I could clearly hear all of this going on. I quickly turned the little lock on the doorknob, just in case they did make it into the basement. My heart was practically jumping out of my chest. I'm talking to the 911 dispatcher as my 8-year-old cousin clings to my arm. The operator is calm and trying to keep us calm, but I knew it would be at least 30 minutes until a police officer could get up there, assuming they didn't get totally lost on this mountainside in the pitch dark. I just kept thinking that we were screwed. We are dead. This is how I die. The operator asked for the number my aunt and uncle left me so she could have another dispatcher call them to let them know the situation. I turned around to grab the paper with a number on it. To my absolute horror, I see a man peering in the large sliding glass door. A huge, burly, what had to have been a 6'4" man with long, scraggly red hair and a big, bushy beard. And what made it worse, he was grinning at me. Grinning in a way that still scares me to this day. Meanwhile, I had to have looked like a terrified deer in the headlights. I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. There was also a second man behind him that I couldn't see as well. I have no idea what he looked like, but he was equally as tall, but maybe a bit more lanky than the larger man at the sliding glass door. I screamed into the phone, "Oh God, they are here." And before the 911 operator could say anything, my 8-year-old cousin goes, "Mr. Jim?" His voice was very confused. It wasn't like my cousin was happy or even relieved to see him. I asked him, "You know who that is?" But before my cousin could answer, I turned my attention to the man at the door. "Hey, I'm on the phone with the police," I shouted. The man stared at me hard for a moment, eyebrows furrowed, like deciding what he wanted to do next. But he then just backed away into the darkness. What seemed like an eternity later, I saw the truck lights back out of the driveway and then back down the road until they disappeared. I was still scared shitless, and so was my cousin. He had only met that guy a few times, an acquaintance of his dad. It wasn't like it was a close family friend, and obviously because again, he went down the wrong driveway. Visitors never go down that way. The 911 operator asked for a description of the man, then told me they'd gotten in touch with my aunt and uncle and they were on their way home. She stayed on the phone with me until a police officer showed up a bit later to make sure the men were gone, and they stayed with us until my aunt and uncle got home so they could ask them some questions. My uncle was furious. Not at me for calling them home early, but at this Mr. Jim guy. He muttered something like, "I'm going to F him up." My aunt was mad at my uncle and told him to tell Jim to never come back again. I didn't know this at the time, but as I grew up, I learned that my uncle had a drug problem. I don't know what Mr. Jim or his accomplice were doing, or what they would have done if I wasn't on the phone with the police. But that grin was not a friendly one. It was sinister. And again, he also had to have known my uncle was not there, because the basement was dark. He would have seen through the window of the basement door. He had also tried lifting the garage door, something not even my uncle did. He intended to break into the basement, that much is clear to me. There is no other explanation. I never babysat for them again, and I don't think I ever went back up there because not long after, my aunt divorced my uncle and moved out. I just want to say this all happened when I was 18. I was young, innocent, and naive. Now that I'm in my mid-20s, I would never let this happen again. It was my freshman year at college, and as one could imagine, I was excited to be on my own for once in my life. So much so that I decided I was going to take summer classes on campus. That way I wouldn't have to worry about coming in when the big crowd of freshmen came in, and I also would already know where everything was. Plus it meant I could get away from my parents faster. You see, I never dated anyone through high school, so I thought I would find my one true love at college, because of course, that's what all the movies told me. About 2 weeks went by, and me and one of my roommates, I had 4, were hanging out in the lounge area showing off pictures from Instagram of our friends, family, etc. Well, my roommate Tracy showed me a picture of her and these 2 guys. One of the guys was Tracy's boyfriend, and the other was Tracy's boyfriend's best friend, Sean. Now, Sean was very attractive, and I told Tracy that he was hot. And she told me that he went to the tech college near us and that he was single. Now, a day or two goes by after this, and she tells me she told Sean that I was interested in him, and that he wanted to know if he could follow me on Instagram so he could message me. At the time, I trusted Tracy because she seemed like a cool and chill girl, so I told her yes. But I wish I never told her that. At first, it was okay. I talked to Sean for about a week before I was comfortable enough to give him my phone number. At first, he seemed super sweet. He would always send me a text message in the morning and telling me to have a good day at class and that he couldn't wait to FaceTime me that night. And we would FaceTime every night. At first, I loved it because I never had a boy give me so much attention. And like I said before, I had never dated anyone, so I was just over the moon that he was even interested enough in me to talk to me. But it started to get annoying. He would text me almost every second of the day and try to FaceTime me non-stop. When I wouldn't respond to him, he would ask if I was okay, why I wasn't answering him, and if I was seeing another guy, and that if I was seeing another guy, that it would make him really mad. I, of course, once seeing the messages, would try to reassure him that I was okay and that I wasn't seeing anyone. Like I said in the beginning, I was young and naive, so I didn't see it as a red flag. Things kept going downhill, though. It came to a point where he started asking for pictures of me. Either just selfies or pictures of me in the mirror. I wouldn't send them though because I wasn't comfortable. And he would brush it off, saying that was fine and I could send him pictures of myself to him whenever I was ready. One day I was in class for a long time because it was a lab, and it started at 7 p.m. and wouldn't end till 10 p.m. that night. For those of you that don't know, labs in college can last 2 to 4 hours, and mine just happened to be 3 hours that night. Once class ended, I headed up to my dorm and took out my phone. I clicked the button on the side, lighting up the screen. I had 380 unread texts, 10 missed calls, and 3 voicemails from Sean. Before I could even react or even read all the messages, my phone started to ring. Instead of being Sean, it was my dad. He had called me to make sure I was alright because he got an alert from the phone company that I had gotten all those messages. I was still on his phone plan. I don't know why, but I lied to him and laughed it off, just telling him that I was in a group chat with a bunch of girls from school. Once I got off the phone with my dad, I quickly went to look at the messages I had gotten. Most of them were demanding, like why I wasn't answering him and how he would come find me if I didn't. The voicemails were crude and mostly of him saying how he was going to find me, and when he did, he was going to punish me for not answering him. After this, I just completely blocked him on everything I could think of. I was completely freaked out about the whole thing. About a week goes by and I start to slowly forget about the incident, trying not to think much about it. At least that's what I was trying to do. That whole week though, I felt like someone was watching me, but I brushed it off as me being paranoid. At the end of the week, my roommate Tracy, who I had been avoiding, came up to me shouting at me saying how I broke Sean's heart, and that he had called her crying, saying he didn't understand why I stopped talking to him. I couldn't even get a word in with her because of how fast she was talking. She finally called me a self-centered bitch and walked away. I went to class right after that, not realizing I forgot to lock my dorm room. You see, I lived with 4 girls and each girl had their own room, which would lock from the outside with a key. But when I came back from class, I noticed my door cracked open slightly. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hesitated going in and my hands were shaking terribly, but I finally got the nerve to push the door open. Nothing. There was nothing out of place, it seemed. Even though there was nothing out of place, I could have sworn I closed the door before leaving for class. Though I don't remember if I had locked it or not. I know for sure I closed it. So I asked my roommates, including Tracy, if anyone had gone into my room today, and they all denied it, even Tracy. But I just knew in my heart that someone had to have been in there. Just like everything else, I tried my best to brush it off, but I just couldn't. So one weekend, when I knew that all my roommates were going to be out of town, I switched dorm buildings in rooms with the girl that I had gotten to be close friends with. After I moved in with her, I told her all that had happened, and she said that she would walk with me to my classes. Thankfully, we had most of our classes together, except the night lab that I had. And even then, she would walk with me to my lab, and sometimes even wait until it was done to walk with me back to the dorm. One night, though, she had gone out of town to see her parents or something. I was walking back from my lab, and it had gone on really late that night again. I heard someone walking behind me, but I didn't pay any attention to it, since class was just let out. But as I was walking, I could hear the steps getting closer, so I started to pick up my walking speed. At this point, I could tell someone was following me, and I was too afraid to look back. As the footsteps increased and got faster, I started running as fast as I could. Now let me tell you, I'm not athletic by any means. Somehow though, adrenaline probably, I was able to sprint to my dorm building, hearing someone still running behind me, and I thankfully already had my key card out to get into the building, and I swiped it on the door and slammed it behind me. Looking up from slamming the door, I see someone who's probably about 10 feet away from the door, staring at me. Even though the person's hoodie was up and I couldn't see their face much, I could just see that they were looking at me, and I knew it was Sean. Not wasting any more time, I go to the RA that was up that night, bawling, telling him what had just happened. He called the police, and I told them everything that happened. But they basically said they couldn't do anything since I didn't see his face, even if I thought it was Sean, and that it was a possibility I was just paranoid since it was nighttime and I was walking by myself. After all this, I called my friend and told her what happened, and she never went out of town again if I had my late night classes. I eventually decided college wasn't for me and I dropped out. I moved back to my home state and went to cosmetology school and became a hairdresser. I still haven't dated anyone yet though. Maybe it's the fear of something like that happening again. I don't know. I do know that I'm super careful with who I talk to now and who I give my social media and phone number to. I'm still scared to go places by myself, even though it's been years and I'm states away. I was 16 and we met on Facebook. We went to a school nearby and we decided to meet up for a movie. We had a great time together and ended up dating. The first time he came to my parents' house, he had an ankle monitor on for house arrest and he wouldn't tell anyone why. Red flag number 1. And since he was a minor, we couldn't find out. My parents obviously didn't allow us to hang out, so we hung out at his house without them knowing, or even around town at the YMCA camp. I was rebellious and naive. Things started to get weird when I noticed that his family was pretty odd. One day we were having intercourse in his bedroom and I saw his father looking through the blinds. I screamed and called him out and his dad ran off. The guy I was talking to told me that his dad was just into redheads and liked to watch us, so this wasn't the first time. I went to leave and his mom was doing crack in the kitchen, so I decided it was time to break up with him. This is when it got bad. He started crying and told me that he's in cancer treatment and that's why he needs me. He doesn't have long to live, blah blah blah. I believed him and told him we could be friends. This is when the stalking started. He switched schools to my high school, but never had the same class, luckily. He would just stand outside of my classroom looking in until it was passing period. When I would leave class, he wouldn't address me. He would just follow about 10 to 15 feet behind me to my next period. Then he would stand outside the classroom again. I was too intimidated to say something to him, as he was tall and a heavy-set guy, so I just let it happen for weeks. It started to progress to where he would follow me home every day. He would get on the same bus as me, despite living across town, and walk 10 to 15 feet behind me all the way to my house. He would just stand outside and staring up at the window until around the time my parents got home, and then he would finally leave. Finally, I told him to screw off and leave me alone. I told him we could no longer be friends or acquaintances and to forget about me. However, that escalated things way further. I started getting about 150 plus calls a night. Half of them were him screaming death threats and in detail torture methods that he wanted to do to me. And the other half were him singing me love songs that he wrote on his guitar. Every time I blocked his number, he seemed to just magically get a new one and leave more messages. I woke up one day to see that overnight he had left me one of those dancing or singing snowmen on my porch. He had stabbed it in the head and the knife was still sticking out. He covered it in his liquid deodorant that I had previously mentioned liking the smell of, and I noticed there was a hole where the little song recording device was. When I pressed the hand, it was not the regular Frosty the Snowman song that played. It was his voice singing eerily, "I'm going to have you forever, I'm never going to let you be." I was done at this point and I told my parents, who contacted the school. They suspended him, but he still waited at my bus stop every day and walked to my home with me. One day he ran at me like he was going to tackle me. When I tensed up for the impact, he stopped and hugged me. It wasn't a regular hug, it was like he was trying to crush me. I was 5'1" and maybe 90 pounds at the time, and he ended up cracking one of my ribs. I cried and he started crying too before running off. He then left me a voicemail later that night apologizing in song. This one night is the night I'll never forget, and it's the reason we got a restraining order and my dad got a gun. I woke up one evening for no reason, just fully awake. I got up to go to my kitchen to get a glass of water to relax, and in the reflection on my fridge, I saw movement in my backyard. I couldn't see well because it was so dark outside and so light inside, so I went to the back sliding glass door to get a better look. When I got closer, I was met with the silhouette of a 6-foot-something man just standing outside the door. My stalker was in my backyard. He was just staring at me. I yelled and my parents got up, but he was gone by the time my dad went outside. There's a patio right outside my bedroom window that goes all the way down to the grounds, so it's possible he could have been on the top of the patio looking directly into my bedroom window before. I haven't seen him in person since, but every 6 months or so, he makes a new Facebook and tries to friend request me. I just block it and I report it every time. Before anyone asks why I have a stranger on my Snapchat in the first place, I'm going to clarify that whenever people add me, whether it's from my Instagram or just quick add, I always add them back. However, I don't remember adding this guy back. So basically, this started yesterday when me and my cousin got home from a party around 10 p.m. We were sitting in my living room for a while just watching Netflix, and nothing seemed weird during that time. At one point, I drunkenly said to my cousin, "Look behind you," because we always mess with each other like that, except she was pretty sure that she saw something move in the window behind her. Not thinking anything of it, I just figured she was trying to scare me back, and I pretty much forgot about it. This was until out of nowhere, a while later on, my dog jumped up and ran to the front door and started barking really aggressively. We kept yelling at her to stop, but she wouldn't leave it alone for at least another 3 minutes. I thought maybe she could have heard a noise from the TV or something that scared her, but the movie we were watching had ended like 30 minutes ago, and we were both just sitting in silence on our phones. Keep in mind, this happened around 12 a.m. After this happened, I was kind of nervous and pretty confused, but my dog had done this a few times before. So once again, I tried to just ignore it and not really think too much about it. It was around 1 a.m. when me and my cousin decided to go upstairs and start getting ready to go to sleep. I was laying down on my phone checking Snapchat when I decided to open Snap Maps. Then I saw it. Someone was at my house with me. I started thinking of all the possibilities of who would be that close to me. The guy's name was Sebastian. At this point, I was really confused and started to get worried because I don't even know a Sebastian. And like I stated in the very beginning, I don't ever remember adding back a Sebastian. I went back downstairs to check and make sure all the doors were locked. In my house, we have an alarm system where every time you open a door, it will chime to let you know. For some reason, it was unplugged, meaning if any doors were being opened, whether it be the shed door, backyard gate, or just any door leading to my house, no one in our house would be notified. I asked my cousin if she unplugged it, and she said she didn't even know that we had it. I was genuinely worried now because when I checked the Snap Map, it said he was last seen an hour ago. And an hour ago was when my dog started viciously barking at the front door for no reason. The more I thought about everything, the more it seemed to be connected, but there was really nothing I could do as I already checked downstairs and locked all of the doors. I actually do have multiple cameras around my house, so I decided I would just check them in the morning, because I needed to get the password from my mother anyway. So I'll skip to the next day. It's currently the next afternoon now, and I'm still waiting to check the cameras, but nothing weird has happened since last night. Although when I last checked Snap Maps, it said he was last seen 11 minutes ago and still around my house. I did, however, send him a chat that said, "Who are you?" And he just replied back with, "Who are you?" So I didn't answer. His Snapchat score is 28,000, so it isn't likely this is a fake account. I won't know anything else until I check the cameras, and I'm not really sure what to do, because I don't have proof of anything yet that I could bring to the cops, and it's making me a bit perturbed while being at my house now. Fast forward. Okay, so today's literally been crazy. Me and my cousin have been both pretty freaked out, and I'll start with last night. My cousin and I had been hearing strange things all night again. We finally got the password to check the cameras, and we checked the footage this morning from last night around 2 a.m. The figure was mostly all black, and we could hardly make anything out. We did call the police, and they came this morning and checked the footage. They also looked around our house just to make sure nobody was still lurking around. They said they would patrol around our neighborhood when it got dark for the next few nights, too. They made a report on the man trespassing, and we gave them as much information as we could so they can hopefully find him. We both feel a little bit better, but it's really unnerving to know somebody actually was in fact lurking around our house the past few nights. Neither of us can figure out what he was doing or trying to do. He just looked like he was walking around, but like I said, we really have no clue what he wants. This whole ordeal has been very stressful and scary for me and my cousin, and the rest of my family. I'm still very shaken up and worried that he may return with worse intentions. I was only 16 and in high school at the time of this story. It was just a regular day at school. I had finished my lunch and I was heading back to class when suddenly the intercom came to life. Attention, all students and staff, the principal's voice echoed through the cafeteria. We are now on lockdown. This is not a drill. Please remain in your classrooms until further notice. I felt a chill run down my spine as the chatter in the cafeteria turned into silence. Lockdowns weren't common at our school, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of despair that was gnawing from the inside of me. I quickly gathered my things and I followed the students as we were being directed to hide in the gymnasium and in the school locker rooms. I checked my phone hoping for some news or updates, but the signal was weak and I couldn't get any information. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the hallway, followed by screaming. My heart raced as I realized that the danger was closer than I had thought it was. I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps approaching from down the hall. My classmates and I huddled and we moved faster together, trying to remain as quiet as possible. We had no idea what was coming our way. The seconds ticked by slowly and we all tried to snugly fit together. It was so packed that it took like 5 minutes before I made the split decision. It was taking too long for all of us to fit through the gym and into the locker room as there was just so many of us. I decided to run through one of the open doors in the gym that led outside where the gym teacher was. I'm not sure what he was doing, but he didn't even try to chase me. I ran to the back of the school and through the soccer field, and I hid near the woods. I whipped my phone out and I attempted to call my mom, when suddenly I turned around after hearing, "What are you doing?" It was a familiar face. Tanner. I knew who he was, but not very well. He had been in some of my classes all through the school years growing up, and he was just staring at me with his menacing eyes and brandishing a weapon. My breath caught in my throat as I looked at him in horror. I couldn't even speak for a second. He had a handgun holstered to his hip and an M4-styled rifle equipped in his hands, and he was pointing it at me. "Hey man, don't do this," I said, pleading for help. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins as he debated on blowing my head off. I stood up and faced him, in the heat of the moment practically thinking this might be the end, and my heart pounding in my chest. To my surprise, I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. I knew I had to try and reason with him, to make him see that there was another way. "Man, you have to stop what you're doing," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "This doesn't have to end like this. Please think about what you are doing." To my relief, he actually lowered his weapon after about 5 minutes of pleading with him. And he weirdly broke down and started crying. I could see the desperation and pain in his eyes as he revealed he wanted the pain to end. Without warning, Tanner turned and left me alone, leaving me in a state of perpetual shock. I knew I had to do something though. I couldn't just sit there and wait for the worst to happen. I made a split-second decision again, and I decided to leave the school grounds completely. I could see the playground in the distance, so I ran towards it, hoping to find somewhere I felt more safe. I crouched behind a fence by the swings, trying to catch my breath, and while I figured out what to do next, I suddenly heard footsteps approaching and I knew I had to act fast. Peeking out from my hiding spot, I saw Robert. Oh man, it was nice to see him because he was one of my best friends at the time. And he said he saw me run out of the school when I did, and he ended up following me. He said he saw the whole thing where Tanner had me held at gunpoint, and he said he almost lost me trying to find me here. Tanner didn't go on to hurt anyone that day, unlike he planned. And surprisingly, he willingly let the officers arrest him. It's crazy how I had barely escaped a terrible outcome. I ran home as fast as I could and told my mom everything while she hugged me and we cried. Tanner was a kid who had been bullied his whole life. That obviously doesn't give him the right to kill people, but man, something in our world needs to change. In 2017, in my last semester of high school, some friends and I decided to skip the pep rally for the girls' varsity basketball team, making the playoffs for the first time. My last period of the day was theater tech. I was just taking it as a fine arts credit, and 2 friends of mine in the grade below me were in that class with me. We decided to skip the pep rally, leave school early, and go to the nearby Taco Bell like we did every day. However, administrators and security guards patrolled the parking lots to catch kids trying to skip, so we took a detour through the nature trail on campus in order to avoid them. Once in the nature trail, we came across this kid I hadn't seen before. He was a skinny white kid with shaggy black hair, wearing baggy jeans and a plain white t-shirt. He was shorter than me, but the most notable thing about him was his general look of dishevelment. His hair was wild and full of leaves and twigs, and his plain white t-shirt was dirty and the knees of his jeans were stained green and brown. He looked like he had been crawling around in the trail. I remember wondering if he lived there for a split second. When we came up upon him, we were walking in one direction, parallel to the school and to the back of the parking lot, and he was coming directly toward us. I knew the nature trail well enough to know that there was a bend that led deep into the woods, and I figured he had come from there. He was out of breath and he seemed scared. Weird. My 2 friends said hi to him, because my friends were in the grade below me and later told me that the kid was in their grade and were just acquaintances with my 2 friends. It was supposed to be just a quick hello, but I couldn't help but notice how scared he looked and how suspicious he seemed of us. He asked us what we were doing in the woods, and we told him we were skipping the pep rally. One of my friends asked, "What have you been doing out here? Camping?" Me and my other friend gave a nervous laugh, but the kid didn't crack a smile. He explained that he was dropped off at school that morning and was supposed to get on a bus to take him to DAEP, which is the alternative school that kids who got suspended from school went to. His plain outfit started to make sense now. It was the infamous uniform of the alternative school. He then explained that he didn't want to go to the alternative school, so when his mom dropped him off, he pretended like he would wait for the bus and then hide in the trail for the full 8 hours of the school day. He was still acting really skittish though, and without even looking at each other or speaking to each other, my friends and I could feel that something wasn't right with him, and that we were in some kind of danger. The kid looked around nervously often, as if seeing if someone might have followed us or if we were alone in the woods. Not long after this, we hit him with a, "Alright man, well, good luck. We're going to try to get to our cars and go home before the pep rally ends." When he heard the word cars, he perked up. He started walking with us towards the parking lot, continuing to talk. He becomes a lot more friendly and asks if we can give him a ride home. We give him some half-baked excuse as why we couldn't do that. We didn't expect him to ask that because I never met him and my friends barely knew him. But he really wasn't taking no for an answer. He tells us that people were going to start looking for him pretty soon, that he was going to be in a lot of trouble. We told him that he'd probably be fine hiding there in the woods, but he tells us, "Nah man, you don't understand. I broke into a car at the fellowship." He then pointed in the direction of the megachurch that had a parking lot that backed up to my school. I took this. From his waistband, he pulled out a handgun and I felt sick to my stomach. I had never seen a gun in real life before. At this point, I felt in danger. Not just because he pulled a gun. I had never really been scared of them. More so that the entire interaction felt uneasy, and that the guy was already unsettling and desperate. One of my friends very cautiously tells him that he should probably just ditch it and take off somewhere. He just stood there, staring at us for an uncomfortable amount of time. His eyes were meeting each of ours. I broke the silence by saying that we wouldn't tell anyone, but that we really had to go before the pep rally ended. And my other stupid-ass friend, who had been virtually silent the entire time, spoke up and said, "Yeah, and it's best we're not around if they start looking for you for that," gesturing to the handgun. His eyes narrowed, and once more he asked if one of us could take him home. This time it felt more like a command. I've never been a super brave person, but in that moment, I don't know why I just blurted out, "Nah man, I'm good." Again, there was an uncomfortable silence. Then he asked, "Before you leave, do you guys want to see something?" My first friend was kind of a hothead, and although he was uncomfortable with the situation, I don't think he was afraid of conflict. Nor was I, but my other friend, however, was not a fan of conflict and would always de-escalate first. We all looked at each other, and me and my first friend kind of had an unspoken understanding like, this is going to happen. If we have to run or fight, we might have to do it now. My other friend was very visibly afraid. He asked, "What do you want to show us?" And before the kid could answer, my first friend said, "We don't want to see. We have to go." My first friend started briskly walking past the kid, and me and the other friend quickly followed. Within a few steps, we just started sprinting towards the parking lot. I looked back once we were about 50 steps away, and he was still standing there watching us run. He had put the gun back in his waistband before taking a small adjacent trail back deeper into the woods. By the time we made it to the parking lot, there were police everywhere. We were sweating, out of breath, and terrified. They found the kid in the next 10 minutes or so. Somehow in the chaos, nobody saw us exit the nature trail and into the parking lot. But since there were so many cops in the parking lot, we decided to just head back inside through another side door to find that the door was locked. That's when an administrator had found us, brought us inside, and shoved us into a classroom where we were able to talk with others and find out exactly what was going on. This is what we could piece together from what we learned. Turns out that the kid had skipped DAEP, like he said, hid in the nature trail, broke into a car at the church, and stole a semi-automatic shotgun and a handgun from the car. After stealing the guns, he texted his girlfriend and he told her that he was about to do something really terrible, and that when she saw his name on the news, she should turn off the TV. He told her explicitly how he was going to hurt some kids at the school. She knew he was supposed to be in class and was so worried about the text that she contacted the police. The school was put on lockdown until officers got a call from a guy at the church that 2 guns had been stolen from his car behind the school. And that's when they put 2 and 2 together and caught him hiding in the woods. I guess when he saw me and my 2 friends in the nature trail, he quickly hid the shotgun but didn't have time to hide the pistol, or maybe he didn't care enough to hide it. So I guess it's been about 9 years or so now, which seems pretty unbelievable to me. It's such a vivid memory that it almost seems fresh, but I think that may also be because I've repeated it so many times by now that I pretty much have an entire monologue memorized, recounting exactly what I experienced. Seems pretty weird to say it, but I was definitely lucky in some way. Luckier than most. I knew some kids that saw a lot more of what happened that day than I did. In my opinion, I've pretty much moved on from the shooting, and I haven't really suffered from any long-term emotional scars, but a few of those guys ended up pretty screwed up from it all. I know one girl who was super outgoing and smart before the shooting. She ended up dropping out of school our junior year because of a heroin problem, or that's the rumor at least. A few years ago, my sister found out that she had overdosed after she got out of rehab, leaving her 2 small kids with only their elderly grandparents left to raise them. Unfortunately, a seemingly large part of my former classmates have also struggled with severe emotional problems and depression, which definitely resulted from that day. Anyways, I guess I'll start this off like I always do. I remember it being one of the last few weeks of freshman year. It was cloudy, as it often is during the springtime in Oregon. What I remember thinking that was initially odd about that day is that it seemed much too warm for the sun to be hidden behind such a thick layer of clouds. It was hot, sticky, humid, and overall extremely uncomfortable. The high temperatures had forced almost all the students and teachers to the courtyard during passing time, 10 minutes between classes, in order to achieve some temporary relief from the stuffy, non-air-conditioned classrooms that we were stuck in all morning. I have 2 sisters. One is a year younger and still in middle school at the time. My older sister was a sophomore, but happened to be home with a stomach flu that entire week. Thank God. It was a Friday, and I remember everyone was really looking forward to our long Memorial Day weekend. My parents were supposed to take my sisters and I out for a weekend at a nearby resort in town, which is a popular thing to do among our community. I spent the entire time before school making plans with friends and chatting about the various 15-year-old shenanigans we would partake in. To say that our weekend plans had changed would be an understatement. I had PE first period that quarter, and we spent the time playing flag football out on the stadium turf behind the school. Since I had a free second, I volunteered to take the equipment back to the supply closet in the upstairs gym, while everyone else went to the locker rooms to get ready for their next classes. We had 2 gyms and locker rooms on the west side of the school, and a large enclosed courtyard separating them from the other classrooms and administration office. I had finished putting the cones, pennies, and whatnot in their place, and headed downstairs to the locker room, deciding to leave the supply closet open for the next gym period, which has turned out to be the single best decision I have ever made in my entire life. I had nearly gotten to the bottom of the stairs when I heard a loud pop, pop, pop. I stopped dead in my tracks as my mind tried to process the noise I just heard. My confusion turned to horror as I heard the screams and saw everyone left on the west side of campus sprinting down the hallways and through the closest door they could find and slamming them shut. I turned running back upstairs as fast as I could and heard 5 more gunshots by the time I got back to the closet, and I shut the door behind me. All I could do was sit in the corner and bury my head in my knees, sobbing. I heard 3 more scattered gunshots, then nothing. Nothing for what felt like an eternity. I can't even begin to describe how slow time was passing. I had absolutely no sense of time because my cell phone was still downstairs in the locker room, and there was no way in hell I was leaving the safe blackness of the supply closet. The worst part about hiding in the closet was not being able to talk to my mom and let her know I was okay. I just sat there and cried, praying and thanking any God who would listen to me that my sister was safe at home. I would have driven myself insane with worry if I was stuck alone in that closet and not knowing whether or not my sister was okay. I sat and waited for what felt like either was going to be my safety or my death. It seemed like hours before I heard the footsteps. There's no way to describe the feeling of being alone in total darkness, overwhelmed with this amount of fear. All of a sudden, I didn't feel like I was completely alone. I heard 2 sets of footsteps running up the stairs and into the gym, and then nothing, until I was startled to near death as one final pop radiated through the gym rafters. My ears rang as I attempted to accept my impending death, in the fetal position on the floor as footsteps headed slowly toward the closet door. I watched the strip of light under the door as a shadow of 2 feet blocked the light, and I was overcome with terror. I heard the doorknob shake aggressively, and I began to sob, thinking of losing the chance to see my family again, that my fate was stuck in the hands of an angry psychopath on a shooting spree, looking for the opportunity to execute me as I crouched helplessly in a dark and lonely closet. Before I knew it, the doorknob had been broken off. The next few moments are the most vague in my memory as a member of the SWAT team pulled me to my feet and ran with me by his side. It was so fast my feet barely felt the ground. He kept my head down, but that didn't hide everything. I saw so much blood under my feet on the pathways as the officer rushed me through my school courtyard and murder scene. I didn't know him, but I heard of him from my sister. He was a junior at the time and a very depressed and bitter boy. I guess he had few friends, if any, and always seemed to have a temper. She witnessed him one time throw desks and sometimes would have huge temper tantrums in the class when he didn't understand the material. From what I have been told, this is more or less what went down. As I was finishing up in the supply closet, there was an altercation in the courtyard involving the gunman. He had words with another student and pulled out his gun, shooting the other kid 3 times before opening fire on the crowd as chaos ensued following the first round. After fatally shooting both the student and a language arts teacher, he ran into the west wing of the school and hid underneath the bleachers in the downstairs gym for a while. After a while, his cover was blown, and he ran upstairs to the gym where I was followed by an officer and then was shot and pronounced dead, which I didn't see, thank God. It was a pretty terrifying experience, and I suffered from a lot of anxiety for a while after this, but I've lived a pretty successful life since then. One thing I've taken away is that no matter where I am, I always make a point to eye the nearest escape and plan of action, just in case. The first time I ever went to Las Vegas, I was just passing through. I had to go on a cross-country road trip, and Vegas wasn't too far out of the way from where I was starting, so I figured I could spend the first night there to see what it was all about. Although, because I had more important things to get to, I didn't have plans to get super into the experience per se. I also found out that you had to be 21 to check into all the nice casino hotels, which sucked because I was only 20. This really limited my options in a lot of ways, including the hotels I was able to book. Honestly, to anyone listening, the TLDR to this story is, don't go to Vegas if you're not old enough to drink and gamble. There's really nothing else to do. Anyway, I was traveling with my girlfriend at the time, and when we got there during the day, we went around town and found what we could do to entertain ourselves. Then, for the evening, we walked up and down the strip and gawked at what we were allowed to see without having to show ID. To be fair, it was pretty fun and a good distraction to the headache of the impromptu flight across the country that we were being forced to undertake through extenuating but irrelevant circumstances. But I digress. The real underbelly of Las Vegas reared its ugly head when we went to turn in for the night. The only place I could find anywhere near the strip that would actually allow me to book a room was this dingy, sketchy, scary motel with, no kidding, a sex shop and a strip club across the street. Just walking between my car and the door to my room was a frightful experience on its own. We had a room on the first floor, and the guy above us was smoking a cigarette on the breezeway, staring dead at us the whole time we were getting our bags out of my car. Not to mention, the door had ample evidence that it had been broken into several times. So as soon as my girlfriend and I got in, we jammed it with a rug and a chair, and we threw the deadbolt in the latch. We were pretty wired from going to the strip, so we laid up in bed and watched TV for a while. However, an hour or so later is when things started to get disturbing. The guy in the room above us was extremely loud from the very beginning, stomping around and talking really loud on the phone, constantly moving the chairs around and scraping them against the floor, and generally just rummaging through every possible thing that could make noise. At some point, we heard the door open and they started talking to someone on the breezeway. We couldn't really hear what they were saying, but the conversation quickly developed into a dispute, which became a shouting match. Moments later, the door slammed shut and we heard someone screaming. It sounded like a woman screaming, but it sounded more like she was mad than in peril. I was about to call the police, but then the screaming stopped and it seemed as though they were bringing it back down to a discussion of some kind, and I really wanted to mind my business as much as possible. Of course, we kept listening as these two people went back and forth for several minutes. On multiple occasions, something would be thrown across the room. You could tell it was happening because it made an awful sound when the projectiles hit the ground. Around this time, we were becoming very concerned, and I figured it was a good idea to at least call the front office of the motel, even though I doubted anyone would be working at that hour. Unfortunately, before I even had the time to finish looking up the number, things upstairs got even worse. There was a huge crash. Glass shattering followed by the intense thud of bodies hitting the floor. The level of detail of what we could hear was astonishing. It was like I could see each and everything that was happening in the fight that was going on. They were both on the floor, struggling to overpower one another. One of them was grunting and yelling at the other one to shut up while the woman was screaming bloody murder. You can even hear the thuds of them hitting each other. Right away, I abandoned calling the office and I went straight to 911. I reported the active situation to the police, and when I told them the address, they seemed to already know what was happening. They even scolded me a bit and said that I should have called sooner, and honestly, I think they were right. Minutes later, a number of cop cars swarmed the parking lot right in front of my door. My girlfriend and I hid in the bathroom in the back of the motel room in case there was a shootout. The aggressor upstairs noticed the sirens and flashing lights and tried to run away, followed by a whole lot of screaming and shouting by the police. Then suddenly, silence. A little while later, ambulance sirens. Luckily, there was no shots fired. I didn't actually see what happened, but when the cops came knocking on my door to get my statement, I was able to ask them afterwards. Apparently the man we saw in the room above us had ordered a prostitute, but then he didn't have the sufficient funds to pay for the service, so he ended up attempting to rape the woman instead. I didn't ask how far things progressed. I didn't even want to know. I definitely regret not calling sooner, But then again, if I had, he might have found a way to weasel out of getting charged with anything. As it turned out, when he tried to run, he got tased while going down the stairs on the far side of the breezeway. He seized up and fell down a dozen or so steps, then finally cracked his skull open on the pavement. From what I know about the guy, his actions and his general vibe alone, I bet he deserved that even before doing what he did that night. I used to think those big multi-story hotel buildings, owned by well-known brands, were safer than your typical locally operated one-star motels. That probably is true, statistically, but I've had to come face to face with the fact that anything can happen anywhere. I was on a trip for a family reunion in pretty much the middle of nowhere. The host of the function had a big property, so a lot of family members were staying with them. But I knew I would want my own space to stay in so I could unwind from the stress of having to hang out with my in-laws. There was a small development at the intersection of the two nearest major roads, which, aside from a diner and a gas station and a Dollar General, didn't have much except a disproportionately large hotel chain. It was the only real hotel for miles, so it was surprisingly booked up, especially with the other members of my family that had the same idea. On the morning of the first day, after leaving my house before dawn to make the 3-hour drive in good time, I checked into my room before going to the reunion. I remember seeing a lot of people milling around in the lobby, taking part in the continental breakfast and talking with the front desk. But one guy sitting in a chair by himself in the middle of it all stuck out like a sore thumb. He was older and kind of frail looking, but not exactly elderly, just like he'd never really taken care of himself. His hair was wild and wispy, and his eyes were blankly staring into the distance. That was until I made the mistake of making eye contact with him. Then his expression suddenly became super intense, like a crazy person when you can tell there's something messed up going on inside their brain. I immediately felt my stomach do a somersault, so I looked away and pretended I couldn't tell he was hard staring at me for the rest of the time I was in the lobby. After I checked in with the desk, I went up to my room and unpacked, then mentally prepared myself for the day before heading out. Of course, as I was leaving, I made note of the fact that he hadn't moved from his seat, and once again, he stared me down as I was walking out of the building. Over the course of the day, however, with everything that happened, I totally forgot about him. I left the hotel at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and I didn't get back until 10 o'clock at night. Unfortunately, I was stopped in my tracks as soon as I stepped back in the lobby. The first thing I saw was that same creepy old man, sitting in the same exact seat as 12 hours ago, but this time, he had it rotated to face the entrance, as if he had been intentionally watching everyone come through the door all day long. When he saw me, a disturbing grin appeared on his face and he started to stand up. I tried to ignore him and I walked as quickly as I could to the elevator. But while I was forced to wait for it to arrive, he was able to catch up. That's when I noticed just how bad this guy smelled. He really didn't take care of himself at all, and after apparently not moving from that seat for the whole day, he was stewed in his own stench. I had to hold my breath when I finally got in the elevator because, of course, he followed me and didn't press the button for his own floor. When he felt like he had me cornered, he tried to make small talk. "Long day?" he asked. "Yep," I said as shortly as possible. "Traveling for business?" he asked again, taking a small step closer. "Family," I replied. Then I added something for good measure. "They're actually staying in the hotel with me." Unfortunately, this didn't seem to faze him. He just stared blankly and said nothing. Finally, the doors opened and let us out. I expected him to try and follow me to my room the second I saw him, so I'd actually pressed the button of the floor above mine. I basically power walked to the nearest stairwell and went down a story, then slipped into my room. He wasn't able to keep up with me, and luckily, he didn't see me as I went inside, so I figured by then that I was in the clear. I had a bottle of sparkling grape juice that I'd taken from the reunion as a little treat for myself, but since it had warmed up during transport, I stepped out to get a bucket of ice so it could chill while I took a shower. I didn't see anybody in the hallway at first, so I relaxed a little bit. I had to mess with the ice machine for a minute to get it to work, but I was eventually able to get a bucket. But when I turned around, that creep was standing right behind me. My spirit left my body. I was completely dumbfounded that he was able to sneak up on me. He was grinning victoriously too, which just made me sick. "What are you running away for?" he said, gradually inching his way closer and closer. "I'm not going to hurt you, I swear. I just want a taste." Those were the exact words that he said. They made me throw up in my own mouth. He started reaching out his hand to touch me, so I threw the entire bucket of ice in his face and broke out into a full sprint down the hallway, frantically opening my door and slamming it shut, throwing every lock I could. He was several seconds behind me. Again, I was thankful that he was extremely out of shape. But the fact that I literally ran for dear life in the other direction was of consequence to him. I could see the shadow of his feet underneath the door, and I noticed the moment the light from the hallway stopped coming through the peephole. I knew he would have just stayed there and watched me all night if he were given the chance. I held back the urge to confront him and instead called the front desk to tell him what was happening. A few minutes later, the nighttime desk employee came up to the hallway and made him go to his own room. I had trouble sleeping that night for obvious reasons, so for the next night of the reunion, I checked out early, bit the bullet, and stayed with my family instead. Anything was preferable to dealing with that old creep stalking me. I was traveling solo through the Scottish Highlands, driving a rental car from London all the way to Mallaig, one of the northernmost towns in the country. Ever since I'd gone there with my family as a kid, I always wanted to go back as an adult and see everything on my own terms. This was at the beginning of what was supposed to be a backpacking trip across Europe, but because of what happened, I never made it off the British island before going back to America with my tail between my legs. By the first evening on the road, I'd made it well into the Highlands, and since I was sightseeing, I decided not to drive in the dark. Once the sun started to set, I stopped at a random inn on the side of the road. From what I saw, inns in the region are a lot different than your typical American hotel. Everyone I saw once I got into Scotland had a very homey vibe to it, and the one I decided to stay at was pretty much indistinguishable from the rest. Instead of a cheap breakfast, they had their own pub on the ground floor where they served homemade food and house draughts at various times of the day, which I'd arrived in time to partake in for some dinner. Since I was alone, I sat at the bar and I had a chat with some old folks who had me pegged for a tourist before I even opened my mouth. They recommended some places to see along my way, along with their favorite meals and ales, which I duly ordered from the innkeeper. A middle-aged woman came around to greet me. This is also when I paid for my room for the night. It was all very casual and relaxed. A great atmosphere for wary travelers and a brand of hospitality that the Scots seemed proud to provide. By the time I finished my beef stew and a pint of beer, all the other guests in the pub had gone to their rooms for the night, which left me mostly alone, aside from the innkeeper who was keeping me company while the cook was cleaning up in the kitchen. Apparently, since the sun sets so late in the summer, most people in the Highlands are accustomed to going to bed with the sun still setting. But I wasn't used to this, and it was keeping me up, despite the food coma that I was slipping into after eating so much food. I talked with the innkeeper about it, and they suggested we have a few drinks to solve this problem. I obliged, and they offered me shots from a bottle of Scottish liquor that I'd never seen before. I was a bit surprised, as when they said drinks, I figured that it would be more beer, but I wasn't going to offend them by declining. They gave me a tall glass of water to chase it with, but the innkeeper didn't get one for themselves, which made me feel like a wimp. Over the course of the next hour or so, I probably had 3 or 4 shots of that stuff. Obviously, my recollection from this point on is less than reliable, but I've had a lot of time to think about this day. They just kept feeding me liquor as fast as I could drink it. I was guzzling the water too. Once it was finally dark outside, I said to the innkeeper that I was finally ready to turn in, but as soon as I stood up, I realized that something was very wrong. Not only was I drunker than I wanted to be, like way drunker, but I felt like I was more than drunk. I looked at the innkeeper and tried to speak, but I couldn't. The words came out as gibberish. The cook was done in the kitchen and standing next to them too. He was a brute, just standing there with his arms crossed. I remember one of them saying that it looked like I needed help getting to my room as I walked away. I tried going for the door to get to my car, but the cook caught up to me and blocked my way, forcing me to turn around. Together, the two of them corralled me and my belligerents to the center of the building, where there was a staircase with one way leading up to the second floor where all the rooms were and the other one heading down into the cellar. I paused there, thinking the extreme cloudiness of my brain in the moment that there was no way I was making it up those stairs. However, that was the last thought I had before I felt a hard blow to my back as I was pushed down the stairs. The impact at the bottom left me unconscious, which was the end of me for many hours. I woke up in the morning finding myself in the back seat of my car, nowhere near the inn. My head was pounding and my abdomen was in intense shooting pain. I looked down and found a roughly sutured wound on my left side. My heart sank as I realized what happened. I had just been harvested for one of my kidneys. My mind started racing for ways to get the people responsible, but the more that I came to, the more I realized my situation was hopeless. I had been knocked out early in the night through a combination of excessive alcohol, a concussion, along with what I'm almost positive was some sort of sedative laced into that glass of water I'd had after dinner. That gave those people hours to harvest my kidney, then load my unconscious body into the back seat of my car under the cover of darkness, and drive me many miles down the road so that I would never be able to remember which one of the dozens of extremely similar inns I had gone to. My memory of the evening was so hazing from the drugging that even though I could remember a vague description of the cook and the innkeeper, and I can even remember some of our conversation, I have literally no solid memory of the names or faces of anyone that I met that night, especially after eating dinner, which makes me think there was something in the beef stew too. Speaking of, I'm lucky I didn't have a reaction to the sedative and choke on my own vomit with all the food that was in my stomach while I was under. Worse still, this was before the time that rental cars were equipped with GPS, so there was basically no way of being able to backtrack, especially since they dumped me far off the course that I was taking. I'd also been robbed of all my luggage, including my wallet and cell phone. Delirious and distraught, I had no choice but to slowly drive my way back onto a main road where I flagged down the first passerby I could and asked them to call the police. I gave them all the information I could, then I asked to be taken to the station where I began the slow, painful, and disheartening journey back home, 2 months before I'd initially planned to do so. As far as I know, those people who seem to have quite the black market organ harvesting operation on their hands have never been apprehended.